Hello again, Pay Orchard Presbyterian Church Sunday School class. Welcome to Bad Christian Books. We're on lesson 3 of this summer elective. Again, we look forward to the time that we can be together and have discussion and questions and answers on these bad Christian books. But for now, just sit back and kind of listen to my analysis of these books. We've covered a couple already. Jesus Calling by Sarah Young was our first lesson. Our second bad Christian book was Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by Peter Scazzero. And now we're on to a third one, a book called The Road Back to You by Ian Crone and Suzanne Stabile. Now, here's the book, if you haven't seen it before. Let me hold that up, not in my face. The Road Back to You, published in 2016. It's an Amazon #1 bestseller in the category of Christian spiritual growth. So even though in some ways it doesn't act overtly Christian, it is Christian and in the category of bad Christian books. Now, you may never have heard of this book. Many of you don't even have it or have heard about it or its authors even. But I would guarantee most of you have probably heard about its subject matter. And that is the Enneagram. The Enneagram, Enneagram. You might have pronounced it Enneagram or something like that, but it's the Enneagram. And so the subtitle to the book, if you can see it as I hold it up again, The Road Back to You, An Enneagram Journey to Self-Discovery. Now, we'll talk a lot more about the Enneagram, but let me tell you in brief what the Enneagram is, a little history of the Enneagram. The Enneagram is a very popular personality tool, which is really caught on mainly with Christians. It's a personality tool that claims to offer the perfect combination of ancient wisdom and modern science. Think about that. How can you argue with that? Ancient wisdom and modern science. Now, no one really knows for certain when, where, or who first came up with this personality map. Some trace its origins back to a Christian monk named Evagrius, whose teachings formed the basis for what later became the teachings of the 7 deadly sins. Some others say that elements of the Enneagram appear in other world religions, including mystical groups in Islam and Judaism. Then, if we fast forward to the early 1970s, a Chilean man named Oscar Ichazo and Claudio Naranjo, his pupil and a trained psychiatrist, rediscovered the Enneagram and made significant contributions to it. Naranjo actually brought the Enneagram to the United States and presented it to a small group of students in California. No surprise. No offense, California. The small group of students in California included a Catholic Jesuit priest named Father Robert Oakes, O-C-H-S. Oakes then brought it to Loyola Seminary, and he taught it to seminarians and priests. And it spread from there throughout the Roman Catholic world of retreats and seminars. So its first foothold was in the Roman Catholic world. And then more recently, the very charismatic figure, Father Richard Rohr, R-O-H-R, you may have heard of him or read a book. He has used it extensively, and somehow, even though he's a Roman Catholic guy, he has popularized it among evangelical Christians. So The Road Back to You is just one of many books that explains and interprets the Enneagram. Now, the reason I've chosen it is it is marketed to a Christian audience as a Christian book. And I would say it's easy to understand. It makes the subject matter very interesting and very engaging. So let's go through our 4 parts here then about the authors, the purpose, the good news, and then the bad news. Well, first about the authors. Ian Crone is a best-selling author, nationally recognized speaker, Enneagram teacher, psychotherapist. He's even an eminent songwriter and an Episcopal priest. With transparency, humor, and insight, he is presented at conferences, churches, seminaries, retreats, and universities around the world. Now, in day-long workshops, Ian provides an overview of the Enneagram system, describes the 9 personality types, and speaks to the myriad ways in which the Enneagram can enrich our spiritual lives. He has co-wrote this with a woman named Suzanne Stabile. She's an internationally recognized Enneagram master. She has conducted over 500, think about that, 500 Enneagram workshops over the past 25 years, including hundreds to churches across America. She also teaches regularly in the Baylor Healthcare System in Dallas, in both the cancer and transplant hospitals, and at Richard Rohr's Center for Action and Contemplation. So she's connected to Father Richard Rohr. Okay, let's talk about the purpose of the book, or the purposes of this book. Here's kind of the what the author's take is. They say this: ignorance is bliss, except in self-awareness. What you don't know about yourself can hurt you and hurt your relationships, and even keep you in the shallows with God. So here's their pitch to you. They say, do you want help figuring out who you are and why you're stuck in the same ruts? The Enneagram is an ancient personality typing system with an uncanny accuracy in describing how human beings are wired, both positively and negatively. In The Road Back to You, Crone and Stabile forge a unique approach, a practical, comprehensive way of accessing Enneagram wisdom and exploring its connection with Christian spirituality. Hear it again. How to access Enneagram wisdom and connect it with Christian spirituality for, here's the purpose, a deeper knowledge of ourselves, compassion for others, and love for God. Sounds a little bit like our last book, right? Emotionally healthy spirituality. More of the purpose, they say, not only will you learn more about yourself, but you'll also start to see the world through other people's eyes, understanding how and why people think, feel, and act the way they do. Now, that's very appealing. Understanding how and why people think, feel, and act the way they do. Beginning with changes you can start making today, they promise, the wisdom of the Enneagram can help you further along into what you really are, or who you really are, leading you into the places of self-discovery you would never have found on your own, or I guess by the leading of the Spirit, and paving the way to a wiser, more compassionate person you want to become. So listen to that again. Beginning with changes you can start making today, the wisdom of the Enneagram can help you further along into who you really are. A journey of self-discovery, spiritual discovery. All right, there you go. That's the purpose of this book. Briefly, the good news, and I only have a few brief statements of good news, which tells you I think most of this is bad. But here we go. The good news is the book is engaging, witty, and full of stories. It is fun. It'll keep you reading. It'll keep you going because it does engage really well with the reader. The second good news, out of all the books that describe the Enneagram, it's the best layman's explanation of the Enneagram. If you're just interested, and you can borrow my book if you want to, but if you're just interested in what's the Enneagram, what's it all about, my friends have taken it, they tell me I need to, my church says I need to, that unfortunately a lot of churches force leaders to take it. You'll find it on Facebook, you'll find it on social media to take, and may have taken. I just want to know what it really is. So it's the best explanation. And then thirdly, it does offer some help in understanding yourself and other people. And who doesn't need that, right? Who doesn't need to understand yourself more? And wouldn't it be helpful to understand other people? So it does offer some help in those areas. All right, let's talk about the bad news. And again, I just start with an overview of my general impressions of this whole world. Let's just back up a little bit into the whole realm of personality tests. Being a psychology major, being around it all my life, I've had to take psychology personality tests, studied personality tests up and down, left and right. And personality tests are very popular, have been for a long time. And think about this. The internet claims that personality tests are a $2 billion a year industry in the United States. That's a whole lot of people who are either required to take these tests for work or in a personal effort, they're taking it themselves to understand themselves better. So there are literally dozens upon dozens of dozens and dozens of these tests on the market. Either by pay or, again, free ones that are available to you on social media. It does seem that, again, why a book like this is so popular is because we humans, or moderns at least, are intrigued by the chance to understand self more. So someone comes along and says, here's a way to understand yourself, to describe yourself, to know yourself. We love it. So along comes the Enneagram, a tool, like I said, that's really caught on among Christians. And I would guess there are many people who are watching this video that are already upset that I would say anything bad about the Enneagram, because there are a lot of Christians that have said this is what has helped them tremendously, that they have learned so much. Remember, again, it's offering the perfect combination of ancient wisdom and modern science. Again, two buzzwords we love today. I want modern science and I want ancient wisdom. Here are the quotes here, kind of from different places in the book, that help you get this impression of what they're talking about. 4 or 5 quotes here. The Enneagram is full of wisdom for people who want to get out of their own way and become who they were created to be. Quote, it has to do with self-knowledge. Most folks assume they understand who they are when they really don't. Again, here's another quote. It's one tool to help you deepen your love for God and others. It will help you have more compassion for yourself and other people. All right, let's be careful. Now we're already talking about love for self again. Here's another one. The Enneagram allows us to find our real self, created to be a real child of God, and capable of loving with something of God's own sincerity and unselfishness. And finally, the Enneagram will help you put away your childish ways and become a more spiritual adult. Now, I don't know about you, but all of these things are pretty amazing testimonials from people and from the authors. Again, from just those statements by themselves, we would maybe say this should be a good Christian book. This should be for every Christian. Every Christian should take the Enneagram, should apply the Enneagram. It's almost sold to us, like a lot of books, as a must for sanctification, that you will somehow be less of a Christian if you don't use this tool. So that's kind of the overall feel that you get from this, and a lot of self-help books that make big promises and say they're a must. You need it. All right, so then let's turn. We're on the bad news, right? So let's spend the rest of our time turning our attention to how this tool, this personality tool, this supposed spiritual tool and psychological tool, and really what we're going to find is it's more of bad psychology instead of what we would hope it to be, would be great biblical counsel. All right, so here's our first point. The first point that you get from reading this book is the Enneagram really teaches a wrong view of self. So right there, I got a problem with the entire Enneagram because it just simply teaches a wrong view of self, an unbiblical view of self. Let me explain. According to this book, from childhood, we instinctively place a mask called personality over parts of our authentic self. Well, why do we do that? Supposedly we do that to protect us from harm and so we can make our way out in that harsh world out there. And then, according to this view, over time we confuse the mask of personality or the different personalities we're wearing with our true selves. We lose touch with our authentic self, the beautiful self that we are. So becoming conscious of that true self, that beautiful self, is where the Enneagram comes in. So here's a quote that tells you their view of self. The purpose of the Enneagram is to develop self-knowledge and learn how to recognize and to disidentify with the parts of our personalities that limit us so we can be reunited with our truest and best selves, that pure diamond blazing with the invisible light of heaven. Some beautiful words there. But unfortunately, that means the ground and starting point of the entire Enneagram and this entire book is that it says that we have a good, pure self that's glorious that we need to recapture. This is the first and prime problem with the Enneagram. It's grounded in a view of self that's not biblical, that is not true. Now, it is true to some extent that we can wear various masks and adopt personality styles to please people, to elevate self, or to cover over those bad things about self that we don't like. But it's not true that we're covering up a beautiful, wonderful, marvelous self. It's just not true. Now again, let's be clear. Let me be clear. Certainly, all human beings are made in the image of God. But this does not make us God or somehow perfectly good as God is. Because all of us, unfortunately, are born in sin. We're not just born with a pure self. It doesn't exist. Because ever since the entrance of sin in this world, we're depraved, we're evil, we're wicked. We have no desire for good until our hearts are changed. God's word teaches there is no good, true self. Jesus himself says no one is good. No, not one. So for us to really understand self, we actually need to see that we're using personality to cover over sin. We need to see our own sinfulness, our own weakness, our own rebellion, our own darkened hearts. And then there's a further problem, this idea that somehow we can use a personality test to find our true selves. The reality is, because we're sinners, we can't really know ourselves. We can't understand self. We think we can. We think we can understand, or other people think they can understand self, but only God can. Only God knows the true self. Now, in the book, The Road Back to You, the authors use this quote from John Calvin to defend their unbiblical view of self. Listen very closely. This is from John Calvin. We said, our father in the faith, right? One of our fathers in the faith. John Calvin said this quote, "Without knowledge of self, there is no knowledge of God." Okay? But did this great reformer have a view of self that is pure and good? Not in the least. Put in biblical context, all Calvin was asserting was we need to see our own sinfulness, our own neediness in order to grasp our need for God. We have to know ourselves and know our sins so then we can know God and seek for God. They totally misused this quote. So if the Enneagram is being used to show us our wonderful selves, it will only be a tool of self-deception. Let me say it again. So if the Enneagram is being used to show us our wonderful selves, it will only be a tool of self-deception. A road back to you, as the title says, is really a road away from the truth about you. Bottom line, the road back to you is really a road away from the truth about you. So the Enneagram is really bad psychology from its foundational principles. But now I'm going to stop here really quickly and say someone's going to argue with me out there, and because we can't interact in class, I can only imagine it. But I would imagine there are people that argue and say, hey, I know my true self is not good and I'm not glorious and perfect. I know I'm a sinner, but I just want to use this tool. I just think this tool is great because it helps me understand myself better and other people better. Okay, so does that give us the freedom then? This is the question. Does it give us the freedom as Christians to enjoy the Enneagram, even if it's an attempt to fit bad psychology into a good theological worldview? Can we do that? Can we just use it and reject the bad part of the bad view of self, which is what it's all about, and use it? Well, for that, we're going to have to talk more about how this tool works to see if it's possible or even a good idea to invest our energy and time as Christians in the Enneagram. So to do that, here's our second point. The Enneagram puts all people into 9 personality types. This book claims that there are just 9 different personality types, styles in the world, and that we all naturally gravitate towards just one. Now, I have a problem with that in several levels. I don't think there are just 9 personality types in the world, and I don't think we just gravitate to one. But okay, so we're going to go with what they say. So here's how they explain it, though. They kind of back off that a little bit. Here's what they say. Though we adopt one and only one of these types in childhood, there are an infinite number of expressions of each personality type, some of which we might present in a similar way to yours, and many of which will look nothing like you on the exterior, but are still variations of the same primary color. So you hear how they're saying. They're saying we basically have 9 primary colors, but there's infinite expressions. So again, I have a problem. Then how can you reduce us to 9 personality types? And if we have all these expressions and we're all individuals, but I'll get there in a minute. So here are the 9 personality types. And for the record, the authors say no personality type is better or worse than the other, and none is gender biased. So that just has to be said. None is better than worse. Everybody gets a trophy. So they're all good. Okay, here we go. Here are the 9 types. So listen closely and see which one you think you are. Type 1, the perfectionist. The perfectionist is ethical, dedicated, and reliable. He or she is motivated by a desire to live the right way, to improve the world, and to avoid fault and blame. The perfectionist. Number 2, the helper. The helper is warm, caring, and giving. The helper is motivated by a need to be loved and needed and to avoid acknowledging their own needs. Type 3, the performer. Success-oriented, image-conscious, and wired for productivity. Motivated by a need to be successful and to avoid failure. Number 4, the romantic. Creative, sensitive, and moody. Motivated by a need to be understood, experience their oversized feelings, and avoid being ordinary. Type number 5, the investigator. Analytical, detached, and private. Motivated by a need to gain knowledge, conserve energy, and avoid relying on others. Type 6, the loyalist. Committed, practical, and witty. Worst case scenario thinkers who are motivated by fear and the need for security. Type number 7, the enthusiast. Fun, spontaneous, and adventurous. Motivated by a need to be happy, to plan stimulating experiences, and to avoid pain. Type number 8, the challenger. Commanding, intense, and confrontational. Motivated by a need to be strong and avoid feeling weak and vulnerable. And type number 9, the peacemaker. Pleasant, laid back, and accommodating. Motivated by a need to keep the peace, merge with others, and avoid conflict. Okay, you have to rewind if you want to hear them again. Those are the 9 universal personality types. That's all we have. But we're not done yet. There are other things you need to know to help you understand which one of these you are, because it's not like you can take a blood test and say, oh, I'm a 3 or a 7. It's not even like someone can tell you. You have to figure it out. First, all 9 numbers are conveniently divided into 3 triads. There's the anger triad or gut triad, and that's where the challenger, the peacemaker, and the perfectionist live. And then there's the feeling or heart triad. That's where the helper, the performer, and the romantic, number 2, 3, and 4. And then there's finally, the other one was 8, 9, and 1. Feeling or heart triad, helper, performer, and romantic. And then finally, there's the fear or head triad. We have the investigator, the loyalist, and the enthusiast, 5, 6, and 7. So one way you can get to what your personality type is figure out what you most trust. Do you trust your gut, your heart, or your head? What do you trust the most? You can't say, I trust the Lord. Not allowed to. In this Christian personality test, you either trust your gut, your heart, or your head, and then you get down to 3. All right, that's one thing. But next, you need to understand what your wing number is. You have a wingman. It's always good to have a wingman in life, but you have a wing number. These are the numbers on either side of your number that you may actually pick up some of their characteristics and their energy, the book says. So you may be a 4, the romantic, and no, as my wife knows, and I'm not that. All right, other people might know I'm not number 4. But if you're number 4, the romantic, you might have a 3 as your wing, and the wing, that number 3 is performer. So you might be more outgoing and also want to perform for others at the same time. So you could be a 4 with a little touch of 3, a wing of 3. Your wing number, the book says, gives your personality type flavor or juice, according to them. But finally, the third part is you have to then learn your stress and security numbers. Your stress number is the number your personality moves towards when you're overtaxed and under fire. And then your security number indicates the personality type you move to when you need energy, when you're feeling very secure, though. You draw energy from. Okay, and again, if you have never seen the Enneagram drawn out, I'm sorry I don't have a picture of it. If I had a whiteboard behind me, if I was more prepared. It looks like a 9-pointed figure, and they have lines going everywhere to tell you wing numbers, stress numbers, security numbers, all those sorts of things. All right, so there you go. We're all lumped into 9 personality types, which leads me then to, again, the rest of the critique. And boy, we're going to have to move along here. This is going to be a long session. Might be one anyway. All right, let's keep going. The Enneagram then is not only a wrong view of self, as we said, but the Enneagram, as you heard, ends up being simplistic and reductionistic. Simplistic and reductionistic. As much as those who teach the Enneagram claim that it relies on ancient wisdom and modern science, it's really not that profound. It's really not. There are dozens of other personality inventories you might have taken and models that are really pretty similar. And then what scientific research has really been done on the Enneagram anyway? Sure, these 9 personality types describe 9 different types of people, but they also sound like types you can get on a horoscope or, again, from another test out there, even the goofy ones on the internet. Adding a wing number and a stress and security number may make it sound more complicated, as well as, again, this 9-point geometric shape. But when you really read all the descriptions, they're kind of silly, and they're really not revolutionary at all. A related flaw, then, as I said, is it's reductionistic. Having all personality tests to some level are reductionistic. It puts people in little boxes. Now, we love to do that to ourselves. We love to say, here's what I am in this little box. Worse than that, we also like to put other people in the little box, saying, I understand you because you're a 4 and you're a 9, or I'm a 6 or a 7. Now, when I look, can you really do it? And does it do more harm than good? I would say it does. Now, when personally I look at these 9 personality traits, I see myself in many of them. If I just say, hey, I'm a number 6, I'm a loyalist, does that sum up all that I am? No, the lovers of the Enneagram say that I may have a wing number or become part of another number when I'm stressed out. But in the end, then why is it important for my spiritual growth that I understand myself to be a number 6? If I can also be other things too. Again, what I have seen, this is important, what I've seen from many devotees of the Enneagram is the desire to reduce themselves to a category or a type, and then, here's the key, to explain all their behavior or excuse bad behavior because of it, and then do the same things to other people. Now, I'm not denying that these 9 types don't provide interesting descriptions of people. But adopting this framework and understanding of all human beings is dangerously simplistic and reductionistic, bordering on ignorant. All right, here's another point. Point number 4. The Enneagram relies on faulty self-analysis. I call this point 4, but this is really the second problem with using these 9 points. Even because we're answering this question, hey, can I put it within a proper theological worldview? The problem is it totally relies on self-analysis. According to the authors, your personality type never changes, so your job is just to discover what it is. And like I said, how do you do that? Is there a blood test involved? Sorry about that. Someone trying to FaceTime into my video. Is there a blood test involved? Do you have to go to school for it? No, you simply, this is true, read the book. You simply read each personality type and see which one describes you the best. That's all you do. Let me remove this from the doc. Here we go. You simply read all about your personality type and all the personality types and see which one describes you the best. But here's the trick. You have to select the personality type that describes who you are, not who you would most like to be. I don't know about you, but I often think I'm more like the person I want to be than the one I am. So there's a huge deficit. How can I, a sinner with my own set of blind spots, be trusted to decide where I land on the Enneagram? What if I'm very good at deceiving myself or just very bad at knowing myself? Well, I guess we could all rely on what other people think about us. But how often do most people wrongly judge you or pigeonhole you into a number that you really aren't? Now, this problem doesn't necessarily make the Enneagram dangerous or destructive, but it certainly makes it inaccurate and an error. God has not only made each one of us very uniquely, He alone knows the intricacies that makes us different from any other person. Even though we would like to have simple explanations about who we are and who other people are, they fail to achieve the lofty goals the proponents of the Enneagram seem to have. You will not end up closer to God or more enlightened people simply because you have a good knowledge of your Enneagram number. All right, here's another thing that's more troubling, I think. The Enneagram and this book has an unbiblical understanding of sin. According to the authors, each personality type found in the Enneagram is associated with a deadly sin that drives the number's behavior. Now, that sounds good, but listen to what the authors say the Enneagram means by the word sin. Quote, sin is a theological term that has been weaponized and used against so many people. Instead, we believe, and the Enneagram believes, that sins are fixations that prevent the energy of life, God's love, from flowing freely. They are self-erected blockades that cut us off from God and hence from our own authentic potential. Learning to manage your deadly sin rather than allowing it to manage you is one of the great goals of the Enneagram. You heard it right. This is what the Enneagram promises. It helps you manage your one deadly sin. So, you want to know what these are, right? Okay, here they are. The perfectionist's deadly sin, anger. The helper's deadly sin, pride. The performer's deadly sin, deceit. The romantic's deadly sin, envy. The investigator's deadly sin, avarice. The loyalist's deadly sin, fear. The enthusiast's deadly sin, gluttony. The challenger's deadly sin, lust. The peacemaker's deadly sin, sloth. These are the deadly sins, the distractions that will block you from the energy of life and the flow of God's love into your life. Now, the inclusion of this concept in the Enneagram may make it appeal to more Christians, since they can say, see, it really does deal with sin. The Enneagram wants to help me confront my sin, that shadow side of me that needs to be changed. Now, clearly, these 9 deadly sins are all sinful patterns that all Christians have to die to and put out of our lives. That's the point. We're all tempted to all of them, not just what number you are. We're all tempted to all of them at some point or another. Sure, you may be more tempted to avarice than fear or lust than pride, but does that have anything to do with your personality type? And what about all the other sins out there? I don't see sins like gossip, slander, hatred, murder, self-righteousness, etc. But hopefully you've noticed the bigger problem with these authors and the masters of the Enneagram concept of sin. Do you hear or read anything in this book about rebellion against God, or sin is breaking his commands, or sin is acting out of a lack of faith in Jesus, or sin is self-reliance, self-worship, or self-exaltation, or sin is wickedness, evil, or walking in darkness? No. The Enneagram follows the very modern psychological paradigm of denying the biblical truth of sin, a great problem in our culture today. They redefine sin, making it look like that it's just a distraction, something we hide behind because we don't know any better. So think about this. How can the Enneagram help us know ourselves better if it doesn't truly deal with sin? And more importantly, how can the Enneagram help us know God better if we don't recognize our own rebellion against God, our own inability to please God or to be holy towards God. This is the proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back. If the Enneagram was just another fun, interesting personality test, fine. Have a good time. Learn a few things. But the way it's presented in this book and in seminars and conferences and churches, it's presented that it will help my sanctification, my Christian walk. I don't think so. Without a biblical view of self or a biblical view of sin, it can't help any of us as Christians understand ourselves more or other people more. It will only do the opposite. It will allow us and enable us to stay in self-deceit or grow in self-love. Yes, I know the authors claim that it should help you change and be a better person, but how exactly is that accomplished without a biblical view of self and a biblical view of sin? Well, let me make a few concluding remarks before we end today. Ultimately, the Enneagram in this book is neither ancient wisdom or modern science. It's just another self-help tool with glorious claims that you can find in numerous self-help books in your local bookstore. Finding your number will not grow you closer to God. It will not help you to die to sin and become more Christ-like. It can only give you a name and an overly simplistic description of what sort of person you might be. We all like to identify and say, hey, that sounds like me. But that isn't the goal of the Christian life. The goal is to have less of me and more of Christ, to know Christ more, not to know yourself more. And I dare say that the Enneagram won't help you understand other people more either, as you try to put others in its 9 boxes. Knowing and loving people is much tougher than putting them in a category or giving them a number. More likely, if you devote yourself to the Enneagram, you will think you understand people more, even though you don't. All right, that's the end of lesson 3. We'll see you next time with another bad Christian book.